There is a photograph from the early 1960s that still stops people cold when they stumble across it online. Four men stand together on a ranch set, dressed like Nevada cattlemen, smiling for the camera, as if they had known each other their whole lives. One of those men would later look another dead in the eye and call him a child of Satan. For decades, nobody outside a tight circle of insiders knew who said it, who it was said to, or what could possibly have driven a respected, classically trained actor to say something so dark on the set of one of the most beloved family shows in television history. Today, we finally know the real story, and it is not the story most people have been telling for 60 years. To understand why those words came out of his mouth, you have to go back to a small town in Georgia, long before Hollywood ever knew his name. Pernell Roberts was born in Waycross in the spring of 1928, the only child of a soft drink salesman and a mother who encouraged every creative spark she saw in her son. As a boy, he could not sit still. He played the horn, joined school plays, sang in local shows, and generally treated any stage, however small, as the most important place in the world. Neighbors later remembered him as a boy who seemed to be performing even when nobody was watching, practicing lines under his breath while walking to school or humming melodies while doing chores. Teachers noticed it too, often pulling him aside to encourage him toward larger roles in school productions, sensing early on that his talent was something rare rather than ordinary childhood showmanship. College at Georgia Tech could not hold him, and he walked away before finishing a degree, chasing something he could not yet name. That restlessness led him into the Marine Corps in 1946, where he spent 2 years in uniform but never lost his pull toward performance, playing in the Marine Corps band whenever he got the chance. Fellow Marines apparently found it a little unusual, a young man who could march and drill all day and then spend his evenings mastering brass instruments and percussion just for the love of it. Some who served alongside him later joked that he treated barracks life the same way he treated everything else, as a role to study and perform well, even when nobody was grading his performance. When his service ended, he tried college again, this time at the University of Maryland, and it was there that classical theater finally grabbed hold of him for good. He performed in serious, demanding productions, tackling roles that many actors twice his age would have found intimidating, and once again, the classroom lost to the stage. He dropped out and threw himself into a life of live theater, working his way through stock productions, off-Broadway houses, and eventually Broadway itself, sharing billing with major names of the era. By the mid-1950s, critics were praising him, awards were coming his way, and it looked like Pernell Roberts was destined to become one of the great American stage actors of his generation. He won recognition for a striking performance in a Shakespearean tragedy, and he followed that success with celebrated turns in other classic plays, proving again and again that he had range far beyond a single type of role. Those years shaped him in a way that never really left him. He learned to see acting as serious craft, something closer to painting or composing music than simple entertainment, and that belief would eventually put him on a collision course with the world of network television. Colleagues from those theater years often described him as intense almost to a fault, the kind of actor who stayed in character during breaks and pushed directors to dig deeper into a scene long after everyone else was satisfied with a take. Then television came calling, and it changed everything. Guest spots on popular westerns led to a film contract, a strong film debut, and a growing reputation as a serious actor who could play both hero and villain with total conviction. He appeared opposite some of the biggest names in Hollywood, sliding easily between charming rogue and menacing outlaw, and directors quickly learned that whatever role they gave him, he would bring something unexpected to it. By 1959, he was everywhere, on television, on film, building a career that most young actors could only dream about. That same year, a new Western was being developed at NBC, one built around a wealthy ranching family in Nevada, and producers wanted someone with real dramatic weight to play the eldest son, a serious, university-educated character named Adam Cartwright. They chose Pernell Roberts, and with that single decision, his life was never the same again. The show was called Bonanza, and almost nobody could have predicted just how enormous it would become. It ran for 14 seasons and told the story of widowed patriarch Ben Cartwright and his three very different sons, each born to a different wife who had passed away. There was gentle, powerful Haas, hot-tempered and romantic little Joe, and thoughtful, educated Adam. Audiences fell in love instantly. Bonanza became the first Western ever filmed entirely in color, which mattered enormously to NBC's parent company, since they were desperate to convince American families to buy color television sets. The network took a gamble, moved the show to a prime Sunday night slot, and watched it climb to the very top of the ratings, staying there for nearly a decade. It became appointment viewing for millions of families, the kind of show that shaped an entire evening around it. And the four leading men became some of the most recognized faces in the country almost overnight. Merchandise, magazine covers, and fan mail poured in by the truckload, and within a year or two, the cast could barely walk down a street without being recognized. From the outside, it looked like a fairy tale. From the inside, it felt very different to Pernell Roberts. He was a man who had trained for years in the rich language of Shakespeare, who had stood on Broadway stages performing complicated, layered characters. Suddenly, he found himself playing the exact same role week after week, year after year, with almost no room to grow. He grew frustrated with what he saw as thin, repetitive scripts. He was bothered that a grown man in his 30s, playing an educated professional, still had to ask his television father for permission before making any real decision. He thought it was strange, even a little embarrassing, that three adult men would live that way on screen without anyone questioning it. He also felt strongly that the show avoided real subjects, that it lacked diversity in its casting, and that it refused to grow up alongside its audience. The daily grind of series television wore on him in ways few outsiders understood. Where stage work had offered him new characters, new challenges, and new physical demands every few months, television offered the same wardrobe, the same setting, and the same emotional range week after week. He once compared the experience to being asked to paint the same picture over and over, and he admitted that the repetition began to affect him beyond simple boredom. Friends later said the pressure of feeling creatively stuck actually pushed him towards seeking outside help just to manage the stress, something he was surprisingly open about at a time when very few actors would ever admit to struggling privately behind a public smile. He said as much to reporters more than once, and the words did not sit well with network executives. He openly criticized the writing. He complained that his character had not developed in years. He said he felt trapped in what he called a golden cage, rich and famous, but creatively starving. Some in the industry thought he was out of his mind. Here was a man on the #1 show in America, turning down an easy, comfortable future for the sake of artistic pride. But Roberts did not see it that way. To him, staying silent and simply cashing his paycheck felt like a kind of surrender, and surrender was something his personality could not accept. Away from the cameras, his personal life was just as full of upheaval as his professional one. He married for the first time in 1951 to a university professor, and the couple had a son together, the only child Roberts would ever have across every relationship in his life. That marriage ended after several years, and Roberts would go on to marry 2 more times over the following decades, each relationship eventually dissolving despite genuine affection at the start. It was not until much later in life that he found a lasting partnership, one built on years of friendship before it ever became romantic, and that final relationship gave him a stability that had eluded him for most of his adult years. Those closest to him often said that his restlessness in love mirrored his restlessness in his career, a constant search for something meaningful rather than something merely comfortable. That personality, fierce, principled, and often blunt to the point of bluntness, is exactly where the legend of the child of Satan comment begins. For years, the story floating around fan circles was simple and dramatic. Pernell Roberts, fed up with the show, supposedly turned to one of his younger co-stars during a heated moment on set and hurled that exact insult at him. Most people who heard the rumor immediately assumed the target had to be Michael Landon, who played the boyish, energetic Little Joe. Landon represented everything Roberts found frustrating about the show: youthful charm over serious craft, easy popularity over hard-won artistry. The two men were about as different as two actors could be, and that contrast was enough to convince fans for decades that they must have hated each other behind the scenes. Landon himself never fully shut the rumor down. Years later, during a television appearance, a fan asked him directly whether there had been bad blood when Roberts left the series. Landon, always quick with a joke, brushed the question off with a laugh, saying he barely remembered Roberts leaving at all. The studio audience laughed along, but the offhand comment only added fuel to a story that had already been burning for years. If the two men were truly close, people wondered, why would Landon joke about it that way instead of simply saying they got along fine? The truth, once you dig into it, turns out to be almost the opposite of what everyone assumed. Roberts did have real anger during his years on Bonanza, but that anger was almost never aimed at his fellow actors. It was aimed squarely at the writers, the producers, and the network executives who he felt had broken their promises to him. When he signed on to play Adam Cartwright, he had been told the character would be given serious development, that scripts would be thoughtful and carefully written, that the show would grow more mature as it found its footing. None of that happened the way he expected, and the frustration built year after year until it became almost impossible for him to hide. Behind closed doors, according to people who worked on the production, his sharpest comments were reserved for story meetings, where he would push back hard against scripts he considered lazy, sometimes refusing to shoot a scene until changes were made. By the time his contract obligations were finally fulfilled, Roberts had made up his mind. He left the show after several seasons, walking away from enormous fame and an enormous paycheck because his artistic conscience simply would not let him stay. The last episode he filmed aired in the spring of 1965, and producers scrambled to explain his character's sudden disappearance, eventually telling audiences that Adam had simply moved away to pursue a new life elsewhere. Behind the scenes, some executives privately admitted they had underestimated him, that his talent had elevated every scene he appeared in, and that replacing him was far harder than they expected. His departure, sudden and dramatic as it was, left a vacuum that Hollywood gossip quickly rushed to fill. Reporters loved a good feud story, and a moody, outspoken actor walking away from the biggest show on television was the perfect setup for wild speculation. Stories grew more exaggerated with each retelling, and somewhere along the way, the idea took hold that Roberts had launched a vicious, personal insult at one of his co-stars in a fit of rage. It made for a dramatic headline, but it was never the full picture. Tabloid writers of the era were rarely interested in nuance, and a story about an actor frustrated with studio executives simply did not sell papers the way a juicy feud between two handsome leading men could. According to people who actually worked alongside both men, the relationship between Roberts and Landon was far warmer than fans ever realized. One former cast member later shared a memory that says more than any rumor ever could. Years after Bonanza had ended, while Roberts was busy filming his new hit medical drama at a hospital location, Michael Landon quietly showed up on set. He had been visiting a relative nearby and decided to surprise his old co-star. Rather than staying at a distance or exchanging polite small talk, Landon walked up behind Roberts and tapped him on the shoulder. Roberts spun around, and instead of tension or awkwardness, he immediately pulled Landon into a warm, genuine hug. The two men sat together for a long while, laughing and catching up like old friends who had simply been too busy with life to see each other, not two rivals nursing a grudge. That single moment quietly dismantled decades of gossip. People who hate each other do not react that way when they are caught off guard. Whatever tension existed on the Ponderosa, and there was certainly plenty of it, was never really about Michael Landon at all. The sharp words, the venomous accusations, the frustration that occasionally boiled over into something that sounded almost demonic, all of it was really about a talented, principled actor fighting against a system he felt was wasting his gift. He was not angry at the people standing beside him in front of the camera. He was angry at the people making decisions behind it, the ones who he believed had promised him artistic respect and quietly failed to deliver. Pernell Roberts went on to build an entirely different kind of legacy after leaving Bonanza, eventually finding new success and proving that his talent had never actually been the problem. He carried his outspoken nature with him for the rest of his career, never apologizing for demanding better work and better stories. Michael Landon, meanwhile, continued to shape television for years to come, and whatever the public believed about their supposed feud, the two men clearly understood something the rest of the world did not. Respect between colleagues does not always look calm and polite from the outside. Sometimes it looks like frustration, blunt honesty, and creative conflict wrapped around a bond that never actually broke. So the next time someone repeats the old story about Pernell Roberts calling a co-star a child of Satan, you will know the truth behind it. The insult was real in spirit, born from genuine anger, but it was never meant for the man history assumed. It was aimed at a system, not a friend. And the friendship it supposedly destroyed was actually alive, and well long after the cameras stopped rolling on the Ponderosa. What do you think really pushed Pernell Roberts to his breaking point? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed uncovering the truth behind this classic Hollywood rumor, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more, and check out the next story waiting for you on screen.